we get to the yard, we're ready to do big things. From the job site to the ballpark, we come together and gear up with pride, ready to perfect our craft and dare to be great. Strauss High Performance Workwear is proud to partner with Major League Baseball, celebrating the preparation and dedication it takes to safely get the job done. Because whether you're on the field or in the field, your gear is a source of pride. Strauss and Major League Baseball. Gear up, go yard.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. Agricultural meteorologist Greg Soulje is here with us today on this Friday. Welcome, Greg.
Well, thank you kindly there, Sarah. Hip, hip, hooray for finally Friday. And a little more typical late October, frosty, feely this morning over parts of the good part of the Midwest and the upper Midwest and Great Lakes region. But sign of the late October times, I guess. It is what it is. And that's the story, along with some rain over parts of the southern plains. And we'll talk about that here going forward in our little get together.
Very good. And before we get into the weather, of course, we want to recognize our weather segment sponsor, Strauss Workwear. Strauss is a family-owned global company in its third generation of designing, manufacturing, technical workwear, and footwear for farmers and craftsmen. Strauss, it's a tool you wear. So, Greg, let's put up your slides here and let you give us our forecast.
All right. A week away from Halloween. Maybe we'll have a couple of thoughts on that later on here in our get-together. But there's a look at the kind of infrared satellite picture with the overlay of the radar this morning. You can really see two main areas of interest, at least as it applies to moisture. Some welcome moisture over some of the newly sown and or emerged winter wheat fields. Still some drier pockets over parts of the eastern and southern plains, and it's kind of just what the weather doctor ordered. They'll come up with an inch or two, and we'll take a look at the coverage on that going forward and its direction going forward. Meanwhile, you can see the next in a string of these what we call atmospheric river weather systems. It is just one after another, no discernible break. Out in the Pacific Northwest, for example, it's either going to rain or drizzle or mist or shower and repeat said process out around the Seattle area, SeaTac. For Illinois and Washington football. I'm sure that'll be of interest to you, Sarah. And they're playing out there Saturday. So wet weather there, high snow levels, so no big deal on the snow accumulation. But again, some significant moisture and the start of probably a significant pattern shift for those guys out there, those folks, from a dryness and drought relief standpoint. We haven't, unfortunately, had any numbers come in. You know, we usually talk about crop condition, harvest, progress, soil moisture levels, all that, which is always put together by the great meteorologist at the USDA, Brad Rippey, for example, a gentleman I know down there, does some fantastic work, but they're still kind of on the bench out there. So I think at last glance, it was something like 90% of the soils were short and very short in topsoil moisture in Washington and Oregon. What's been a pretty tough drought pattern out in that particular part of the country. So going forward, you can see again 3 areas of moisture downwind to the Great Lakes areas. That's still some ongoing lake effect. And under that high pressure area, you can see from the southern Canada down to the Ohio Valley, there were frost pockets, and there will be again some frost pockets tomorrow morning past the Ohio. Not unusual, by the way. I know we have some cover crop out there. But these frost and freezes that have materialized are just about 3 to 5 days behind schedule. So it's nothing unusual for late October. We had readings down around 28 to 32 briefly at sunrise as far south as Springfield, Champaign, 25, 26 at Crawfordsville, Indiana. But that's in the Wabash Valley. Again, not unusual. No issue to the back 40 as well. And we'll move forward from there. Matter of fact, nice turnaround temperature readings on the northern plains will get going. In any event, you can see wet weather in the southern plains this afternoon. The red area in West Texas, severe weather down there. And the Pacific Northwest remains wet this afternoon. The rains pick up out there tonight in the overnight hours. And so do the rains down through Oklahoma, southern Kansas, and Texas. They continue on tomorrow morning. They expand. You can see a pretty snappy low out there. The web of pressure lines just offshore of Washington State. So that's going to be a pretty good dose of not only rain, but wind as well. And you get under these cold upper lows. Sometimes you can actually make thunderstorm activity during the course of the late night and early morning hours in the Pacific Northwest. And some of those rains will drop as far south as about the Bay Area and then northward from there around Redding and Red Bluff. So it is the start of the rainy season in the Pacific Northwest. Sometimes when these rains come about all that quicker and faster, you have to keep an eye on where you've had burnout from fires, and they had some of that in that particular part of the country. Got to watch for some debris slide, mudslide potential with time in the Pacific Northwest. But look how the rains expand over the eastern areas and southern areas of Kansas, in and around areas along the Missouri and southward into the Ozarks, and from there all the way down into the western Gulf Coast areas through the afternoon and evening as well. And with time, there may be a few sprinkles into parts of Iowa, the central Corn Belt areas of Illinois and Indiana, and that's it. Otherwise, the moisture pattern continues pretty substantially with wave after wave of moisture into the Pacific Northwest, then jumping into divine country, fairly high snow levels above about 7,000 or 8,000 feet. So, but again, livestock managers keep an eye on some of that moisture as it moves in along the divide on eastward. Then by Sunday morning, you can see the lowering snow levels, not unusual for October. They'll be down around 6,000 or 7,000 feet across the northern and central Rockies, divide country. More rain for the Pacific Northwest, northern California, more rain in some of the key worst drought areas. And, if this were, a November 24th or September 24th, and we're just getting into the harvest season, people get a little worked up about it. But no, we're going to and we should be able to continue this progression of weather systems through November and getting moisture in the ground before we begin to firm it up and freeze it up and have to worry about rutting issues if you're still running heavier equipment out there with soft grounds that haven't frozen up. And the worry about that, the impending winter season, which I think may be dropping like a hoof or a boot upon us here as in all at once. And it may begin around Thanksgiving, more likely towards a holiday season. I think that's the current estimate. We'll talk about that down the line here. In any event, there's the rain through the Delta. And the next couple of days, you can see significant rainfall totals pushing 3, almost 4 inches into far southern Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and east into the Arctic, including the Delta, another tough area. Because of the hot summer ridge, we capped the atmosphere. We didn't get any tropical systems going. That was a busted forecast from the National Weather Service in the Atlantic Basin. It was more busier in the Pacific. Another indicator that we think we're out of it now, but we had still a kind of a lingering El Nino effect across North America. And the moisture, too, continues on Northern California, Pacific Northwest. And we may eke out a few hundredths of an inch and locally under a quarter inch into parts of Wisconsin out of a weather system on the move over the back end of the weekend. Drought monitor from just a couple of days ago, and there has been improvement in this far southern and southeastern part of the Corn Belt, the Ohio Valley counties of Indiana and Ohio, more so in some of that equine country through Kentucky and Tennessee, and more rain coming down there, as well as the lower Mississippi Valley, the Ozarks on southward. So kind of where we need the moisture, we're going to get the moisture, maybe get in the way of maybe late season harvest or fall cleanup or livestock operations. But that subsoil moisture base will have some sense of improvement, including parts of central and eastern Texas. And you can see the reds and beiges out in the Pacific Northwest. So work to do, and that work is underway with additional drought relief in the Pacific Northwest. There's a little more of a snapshot as it applies to the Corn Belt areas, down to the Ozarks, outside of Champaign and points west and south from there, and on a line from about Champaign to Ball State to northwest Ohio, around the Napoleon Defiance, Maumee Valley of northwest Ohio. That is a big ag area out there, and a couple of fine radio stations that do a lot of ag programming out there as well. And then farther south of I-70, some improvement has been noted and some degree of worsening, but nothing to get worked up about for now into the northern and western Corn Belt areas of the Midwest. Severe weather this afternoon, Texas, slight risk. And yeah, you can still bubble up that stuff in late October when you get the right atmospheric setup. And for Saturday, still running from about the Dallas-Fort Worth area along the Gulf Coast area. And a couple of thunderstorms, too, as we had just talked about in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. Yes, under a different setup, you can get thunderstorm activity, especially these big winter storms across the western states this time of the year and certainly beyond. Hazards, if you will, some high wind coming off the northern and central high plains areas. That's expected next week with kind of a combination of weather systems that's going to carve out what we call an upper or low. It's the same setup that if folks were monitoring social media and some of the weather delivery people out there were taking model data, slapping it out there. And models struggle with this fast flow. And then you have a tropical system in the Gulf Coast or the Atlantic. The equations aren't there. The modeling technique is not there. You will have just a mess of solutions going on. And that tropical system, by the way, is Melissa. And we'll talk about that. There are some issues down those Caribbean island areas. If folks remember Harvey few years ago that sat in Texas for about 10 days and just rained and rained and rained. But then you throw topography where you go from sea level to a few thousand feet within a short distance, like Haiti, Hispaniola, parts of Cuba. That is going to be a disaster zone of flooding, and we'll take a look at where Melissa ends up. And it does come up into play in the eastern United States with regard to the stereo currents going forward. And there is Melissa down there around Hispaniola, and it's just going to sit. It's just going to kind of run circles around itself, herself, whatever self down there in the coming days. And so if you get the right trajectory of wind flow and moisture banked up across like the Haitian mountains, you got a problem going on. So you see that weather system. You can see the one in the southern plains, and there's one what we call coming over the top of that in this very fast 120 plus mile per hour jet stream that's slamming into the Pacific Northwest. Those three systems, that's the struggle that people were looking at these models. That's why you can't just take a model forecast without understanding the meteorology. How do you get to point A, B, C, and D? You can't go from A to D and not know what's in between. So that said, you'll see how things do evolve with time. It was kind of the right idea, but the wrong idea and the wrong meteorology behind it, and the wrong weather, sensible weather, as in enough cold air return, which is just not evident at all. Anyway, Pacific's kind of winding down two systems, but they are westbound in the open waters of the Pacific, not anything northbound into the Baja area of California or Mexico, so no moisture source there. Next 7 days, you can see that plume of moisture, Pacific Northwest, along the divide, some moisture, maybe upwards of a quarter to a half, maybe locally to an inch. If we can get the right setup, that might be a little overdone out of the Dakotas and Minnesota. But the right idea, southern Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, in through the Ozarks, the Ohio River on southward. So some of those droughty areas will get further improvement, some topsoil settling of dust, if you will, from the harvesting fall cleanup over the rest of the Corn Belt, and significant moisture too in the Carolinas and Mid-Atlantic region. We are going to entrain some of Melissa's moisture ultimately into the eastern United States. And here's how we do it. So to take a look at how the winds, the lines, if you will, winds are running parallel to those lines, are strong. They're compact in the Pacific Northwest. You can see by the time we go to Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, we kind of carve out what we call an up air trough. There's a low attached to it, and that low kind of slowly meanders southward into the mid-Atlantic region. So we have that, and you can see in the far bottom right quarter, that low is Melissa. We'll at least pick up some semblance of moisture from Melissa, maybe not the storm itself. That's going to go out to sea. Probably have a better idea where Melissa's going to go in the next probably 8-9 days than we do in the next 2 or 3 on these maps and charts. But in any event, we'll bring some moisture into the southeast, the eastern states. That was the low that these models were struggling with in putting this huge winter storm, Arctic air. And if you just can't understand the meteorology, you're just going to rip and read whatever you see come off the models, the GFS model, which is not the real. They all struggle. They all have their better points, their worst points, better points, European model, Canadian, GFS, the U.S. model, that type of thing. They're great from an idea standpoint and the possibilities, but that's about it, I think, if you just can't get from point A to point B in weather forecasting. But that's the low that was supposed to have been in the plains and Corn Belt, and we should have had, according to people looking at these models and the GFS back from Tuesday or Wednesday next week, we were going to bring that jet stream that's across the western states bodily southward and get into Arctic air relative to late October, hence winter storm potential. Not the case. So there it is. Moisture for the eastern states, the southeastern states, and that northwest flow keeps us a little bit cool but drier going forward across the heartland, and the start of probably an extended drier spell. We'll have that 4-week forecast on this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. I think it was the week before Thanksgiving. I should have the dates in front of me. Yeah, the 17th to the 23rd is probably our next significant Midwest Plain States moisture maker there. I let the cat out of the bag, but that's the next round. So we probably go into the first half of November in good shape from an outdoor work, harvest, cleanup, getting feed areas ready to go, fencing, livestock areas, all that involved here. Anyway, temperatures a little on the cool side for the plains and eastern Corn Belt under the cloud cover. Look at the mild air through the upper Midwest, 50s and low 60s there. Upper 40s and 50s continue on through late next week over the eastern and southern Corn Belt, attributed to cloud cover and some degree of rain. The warm-up gets going southern Canadian prairie, back into the plains and along the divide country for outdoor work and livestock operations, and some welcome rain, as mentioned, Kentucky, Tennessee, into the southeastern states, and some frost potential again tomorrow morning, parts of eastern Indiana, Montana, lower Michigan, where the skies clear, the winds finally shift in away from the lake effect moisture belts. And so there'll be some frost potential southern Michigan and into areas of the mid-Atlantic region west of the Appalachians. And look at overnight lows, mild from the Mississippi River on westward. Nighttime lows in the upper 30s and 40s. No frost or freeze or cold wave weather coming in anytime soon. Nighttime lows will tend to be a little bit cooler in the eastern and southern Corn Belt later next week, down through the Delta and southeastern states as well. So next 6 to 10 days quickly here. Now we're kind of running out of time, going a little bit long here, but the strong system, at least strong jet stream winds Pacific Northwest, trough in the eastern states slowly to lift on out. That's a dry setup across the plains of the Corn Belt areas with warmth in the southwest, cooler than average readings, but no cold, just below average readings, especially during the daytime hours in the southeastern states. And I went past the last one, but in any event, there's the moisture pattern still lingering into early first couple of days of November, maybe a little overdone on the far eastern Corn Belt, but right idea Pacific Northwest, right idea with the developing dry time in the southwest, moving into the plains and ultimately into the Corn Belt locale. So next live stream is the 12th of November. We'll update the weather outlook and just go from there on what has, after we get through this week, from southwest to northeast, should be another ample opportunity for livestock operations, get ready for winter time, last a harvest, fall cleanup, cooling of soils, well, maybe slower, and a pretty quiet weather pattern that probably takes us into at least the first couple of weeks of November. We'll break it out for you on this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness.
Very good. We appreciate the insight, Greg, and we appreciate a little more fall coming our way.
Yeah, but very comfortable fall setup. A little frost and freezing, but that's not unusual. That's only about 3 to 5 days later than usual, and not a killing hard freeze. We saw it maybe in the upper Mississippi Valley this morning, but that's at a very mild start to at least November and the mid-stretch of autumn expected in our neck of the woods there, Sarah.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Greg, and we appreciate all of you tuning in as well.